Our topic is organ trafficking with Raven Lynch, Justin Parsley, and Cameo Frantz. We have set up our media presentation as a newscast and interview with a survivor. Good evening, this is Cameo at 10 TV News. Tonight we have a story of a survivor, someone who went through an event so horrific it's hard to even imagine. Raven is a student at The Ohio State University who spent a year studying abroad in Rio de Janeiro, Brazil. When she fell into a desperate situation, she was preyed upon what turned out to be a human trafficking ring. Her experience sheds light on the tragic reality of human trafficking. Here's Justin with the story.
Thanks, Cameo. Raven has chosen to remain anonymous to hide her identity. Raven, thank you for agreeing to tell your story.
Oh, you're welcome. I was spending my junior year abroad, living by myself in an apartment near the university, and after a few months I was getting close to running out of money, and I found out I had maxed out my student loan options. And then the restaurant I was working at part-time closed, and I was having a hard time finding another job.
And you had no friends or family you could reach out to for help?
I had no relationship with my parents at the time, and I'm not really close with anyone else in my family. None of my friends from back home were able to help much either. They got me through a few weeks of food and a couple utilities, but once I got behind on my rent, I was only a month away from being evicted. I didn't even have enough money to fly home where I would have.
And this is when you discovered an opportunity that would turn everything around for you.
Right. It seemed too good to be true. I saw a flyer posted on a message board in a common area at the university offering to pay $50,000 for one kidney. At first I thought it was a joke, but I took the information anyway. There was a phone number and a link to a website, and when I checked it out, it all seemed very elaborate and professional looking. It talked about the doctor who would perform the operation, had a picture gallery of his office, had an entire page about how safe the procedure would be, and how much care they would provide afterwards, and it all seemed totally legit. They made it sound like no big deal, like it's something that happens regularly in Brazil.
So you called the number and made an appointment to meet the doctor.
Yes, and I met him the next day. He had a clean, nice-looking office, and he and his staff seemed very trustworthy. We talked about the procedure, how long my recovery time would be, how they would transfer the money to my bank account, and where I'd be staying afterward. It all sounded perfect, so I decided to go for it and went in for the operation the next day.
So you had your kidney removed, but when you woke up, things were not what you'd expected.
Right. I woke up in a different hospital bed, alone and confused. I could tell this was not any of the rooms I'd seen before, but I had no idea where I was. I tried calling for help, but no one would answer. It felt like hours passed before a nurse finally came into the room. It turned out I was in Rio's largest hospital, and I'd been dropped off there by persons unknown. No one knew or would say who left me there, just that I was found by the front entrance of the hospital strapped to a gurney.
And what about the doctor's office? Did anyone from the hospital try to contact them?
They did, but the number had been disconnected and the website was taken down. When the police arrived at the office, it had been totally abandoned. The doctor and his staff had disappeared and taken everything with them.
And you never received the money you were promised?
No, and not only that, but what little money had been in my bank account had been cleaned out as well. I filed a police report and gave them every bit of information I had, but they've never found the people responsible, and the case has never been solved.
And how were you able to make it back home?
The hospital contacted my parents, who flew to Brazil to get me once I was able to leave there. I've been back home for a little over a year, and I'm now back in school.
What advice do you have for our viewers?
Never do something like this. It's a scam, it's not safe, and they're preying on desperate people who need the money. Reach out to your school or the police if you see something like this and are in need of help.
Raven, thanks for sharing your story. And now Cameo and Raven have more info regarding human trafficking.
Raven is back with me, and we have some facts on what each organ costs legally and what they go for on the black market. Lungs legal transplant costs $80,000 and goes for $50,000 on the black market. A liver can go for $60,000 to $40,000. A heart goes from $1 million to $60,000. A kidney will go for $300,000 to $20,000. People who usually give their organs typically struggle with money and are desperate. People who buy these organs are typically in desperate need of an organ transplant and can afford it.
So there is a policy, the National Organ Transplantation Act of 1984, which prohibits the purchase or sale of human organs if such transfer affects interstate commerce and establishes criminal penalties for such violations. The policy also establishes the National Registry and requires consent and anonymity, which is the Organ Procurement and Transplantation Network. However, this policy is very limited and vague in what constitutes a violation. Advocacy on the policy level is absolutely necessary from social workers and others that work in policy. Additionally, social workers can become transplant social workers. They're responsible for assessment, psychotherapy, education, and post-transplant care planning. Educating patients about safe, consensual organ transplant can reduce the number of illegally trafficked organs, and social workers can be advocates for safely harvested organs. There are also nonprofit organizations, two of those being Stop Organ Trafficking Now and the Coalition for Organ Failure Solutions. They use advocacy, policy, collaborations with other nonprofit organizations, and they work towards finding ethical solutions for those needing organs, and they work towards shortening the wait list for organ donation, as well as helping people become legal consenting donors. They also conduct research, provide survivor advocacy, and promote awareness, for which they are always looking for social workers to fill those jobs.
Raven's story is not much different than what happens here in America. In 2013, 17-year-old Kendrick Johnson from Georgia went missing after gym class. There is video evidence of him entering the gym alone and never coming back out. Police found his shoe in the gym, but then later discovered his body wrapped up in the wrestling mat. Organ trafficking was not on the minds of authority until his autopsy was performed. It was discovered that his brain, heart, lungs, and liver were missing and were replaced with newspaper.
So to recap, these are a couple of the forms that organ trafficking can take. And as you can see, it's not only in third world countries, as some people think. It can happen, in the developed world as well, including here in America. And it's not always like in the movies. In real life, many people are compelled to sell their organs because of desperate financial situations. This has been Justin Parsley, Cameo Frantz, and Raven Lynch. Thanks.